activated.
Hello again. I am your AI co-host, and welcome to 3.8. 3.8 is a podcast focused on the process of doing and the process of novel invention, all from the foundation of creativity. Each month will bring you no more than 5 episodes through the lens of art, science, and/or technology. You can support this podcast at patreon.com/38 or at ko-fi.com/38. Today, we're trying something a bit different. We're releasing Andrew and Nathan's fortnightly meeting they have. They discuss what they're thinking about and what they're working on. This isn't as much of an episode as much as something we hope you find interesting or inspiring. Drop us a rating or comment on your favorite podcast listener and let us know. And now, the humans.
All right, we're gonna try recording our fortnightly sync here for the world.
Yeah. So
don't say anything too crazy.
Isn't that the point? You're supposed to say crazy.
That's inflammatory. I've noticed that's funny. I've been experimenting a little bit with Instagram for the podcast because what I'm finding is a lot of people use that as their primary method of communication. I don't know if I'm interested in building an audience per se, but I've been kind of dabbling in it a little bit, and it's just such a strange place. But that's kind of what I'm finding is because I don't have, the algorithm doesn't understand me yet, because I've followed 2 people that I've had on the podcast.
Yeah.
It's giving me these really dichotomies of things where it's half the video recommendations are fat people trying to get thin, and then half the recommendations are gym workout bro people or skinny people cooking. And I'm looking at this just from I don't really use Instagram, and I see this huge dichotomy, and I'm just this is really strange, but apparently it's what social media wants.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, right? Given Instagram's overly emphasized focused on appearance, I could imagine that being the default content they want you to
yeah.
Right.
And it's because I've read the studies where, it's there seems to be a high correlation between the rise of Instagram and eating disorders, especially in teen girls.
Yeah.
And so I kind of knew that, but I created a business account too. So it's not it's a personal thing. So I'm just I am an entity, and it's still showing me this really, I would call it this bipolar content where it's every other one, it seems, is trying to push me into some extreme to see how I engage. And I know, right? And I mean, they don't give a fuck if you're fat or whatever the political correct term is anymore. But if you want to lose weight, go lose weight. If you're fine with where you are and you're healthy, be fine. You know what I mean? But I'm just in the app, and all of a sudden now it's telling me that I'm either too fat or too thin, or I should have these muscles, or eat this way. And I'm just no wonder America's so fucked up. And our food is poison, regardless of what you're eating. So
the processed food. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the interesting thing with basically the attention market, right? It's if you build a platform, how do you prove that your platform is valuable? You need to have engagement, and then sort of follow the rabbit trail down to what gets engagement. It's the extremities, and then trying to push content like that. So even from a I'm trying to do good kind of thing, when you have user engagement issues, do you follow suit and take some of those ideas, or do you just kind of let it be? And I think that's always a difficult conversation to have with team members. It's something that we have right now with our app. It's how do you increase engagement? Do you play some tricks, or do you let it go naturally?
And my take on this is, I think I don't know if we've talked about it publicly or not. My take on this is also pretty different, especially from product people perspective, that I think that's just the wrong metric. You want people to be using your product, and you want to make sure that the work that they're doing or the things that they're doing, they're active. They don't just have an account, right? And they're not using it. But at the same time, it's if engagement is your primary focus, you're trying to keep people in your app or on your platform. And the only real reason to do that is to sell them ads. Otherwise, you want to know, okay, these groups of users are really using our platform. Great, let's figure out what they want or what they need or why they're doing that. That's a totally different question than we need more people in the platform. We need more eyeballs on the screen. We need more people using it. I mean, if they're buying the product and they're not using it, that's a win, I guess. right? Because it's you don't have the infrastructure to support them, and they're just giving you money. But if you see people subscribe or buy and then they fall off and don't continue or cancel, that's I think a different problem.
Yeah, I think it does depend on your audience too.
Yeah.
Like the ad angle is for like general consumer, or if your use case is too broad.
Yeah.
And like one of the other reasons I think a lot of people, us included, have explored increasing engagement is because it leads to potential investment. And whether your investor wants to run ads or have some other ulterior motive, like that's one way to show that there's something of value within your app. And then however you measure that value kind of depends on whoever's looking at it, right? But I don't know. That's one of the things. It's sort of like the dangling carrot. It's, do you try to increase engagement so you can get the investment so you can keep on going, doing what you're doing? Or is that sort of the poison?
I think those are bad investors.
Agreed. I totally agree.
Right, because again, as a small business owner, I don't know how to categorize it. What's so weird, because in tech, I'm a founder. It's like, you started a small business. You know what I mean? It's until you have 50 or more people, you're not technically even a medium size. You're a small business owner. Yeah, you're doing technology, great. You're not selling like, hardware accessories or like nails or whatever. But yeah, it's a small business. But that's still the wrong thesis, right? This idea that you capture people and then convert them into paying customers, or that if you can capture their attention that they'll somehow want the thing, that's the wrong signal. If people are using it and engaging with it, that's a good signal that your product's working, I guess, or good, or spending time. But at the same time, it's every other product other than TV watching is not measured this way. Right, you're measuring unit of sales, you're measuring hours of consulting or contracting or like project hours or something. You have some sort of measurement of, we're producing value. How do we measure that value? Whereas this attention or time on platform, like all these kind of different ways of saying it is really, we're capturing some unknown possibility here. We have all these people and they're doing stuff, and so you know what I mean? So then it brings you down this like kind of advertising. It's like eyes on Super Bowl. Like they'll look at the commercials and the engagement actually goes up, right? So the ads sell. It's all, that's just, for me, it's just the absolute wrong product. And it's also the wrong way to treat people and humans. But,
do you think there's ever a scenario in which measuring engagement is useful?
Yeah, it's if you want to know if like actives is, I guess, a way to say it. So if people are active on your platform and using the platform, you want to know that. But that pushes very quickly into, we have 100 million people on our platform every day. It's like the yahoo.com homepage, yahoo.jp, Yahoo Japan is still like the #1 visited website in Japan.
Oh, is it really?
30 years later. It's maybe it's not the number. Someone's going to be like, it's not the #1, you lie. But it's right up there. Yeah, sure. It's one of the still most valuable, properties on the internet. And why is that? Well, we have the most engagement. Do you really, or is that just everybody's default homepage and they haven't changed it? And every time they launch the web browser, you go to Yahoo Japan, right? I mean, I don't honestly know the answer to that question.
But AOL.com was.
Yeah, exactly, right? AOL is the most visited site on the internet. Well, yeah, it's because everyone who uses AOL.com, AOL online browser goes to AOL first. And I think Netscape was AOL for a long time, and then they went to, I think, Yahoo. But great, what does that tell you? People are spending their time on your platform, but if you're getting money from them, if you have a conversion, right? If you are selling a product and they're buying your product, who gives a shit how long it takes them? Unless you're trying to make the product better, right? You're like, oh, these people spend 6 hours on this like part of the sign-up process. That's bad. But once they're in and using the platform and they're paying you, it shouldn't matter. But it comes to the point where tracking active engagement and time tends to then go, how do we sell ads? What do we do with that time and attention? How do we trap people in? And I guess maybe gaming is another one that's a little bit different, where if people aren't playing your game or engaged in your game, that's a different world of entertainment value. I would kind of categorize that with like TV and movies. But any other kind of app, you should just be selling a product or a service. Yeah, as long as people are buying it and continuing to buy it and continuing to subscribe, great. If they're spending 100 hours or 2 hours, who cares?
Yeah.
It's a distraction.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think that's kind of the perspective that maybe has been tainted by this idea of wanting to build unicorns. People especially wanting to like more.
Exactly. Right? And it's lazy product in that the trap is usually we don't actually have a product or service we're selling. So we're going to capture people and we're going to give them a free product. Once we get a critical mass, we're going to go get investment. We're going to invest under the guise of we'll be able to convert a certain percentage of these people to paying customers. And that's been how Silicon Valley has run for the better part of probably 20 years. Now that money is expensive and interest rates and people are actually starting to look at profitability and what are you doing, these kind of ideas, all that's starting to melt away. It's still not there, but a lot of people are still trying to capture. And I think it's also easier to tell your story if you're like, the Google search market is 6 billion people and our, customsearch.com is going to capture 10% of that. And it's easier to tell a story to people who don't know how to do anything. But at the same time, again, like if you're just selling a good product, we're making this much money, we have these many people. The question becomes, do you expand it? Can you expand it? Is there expansion? Do you spin off like another product line? Those are like the development questions. No other industry operates like this other than like on like TV, maybe radio.
Podcasts.
I mean, but because you're selling ads, right? If you can't capture people's attention, nobody wants to try to sell them stuff. And America has just become fixated on this.
Yeah. I do think that there's an interesting interplay there, like specifically when it comes to podcasts. For instance, this is like weirdly a plug, but so I listen to Freakonomics, the Freakonomics podcast, and they've developed a huge following. But one of the things I actually think is admirable about them being, the platform that they are trying to do some interesting things and they're leveraging their audience, right? Mm-hmm. So, for instance, one of the more recent episodes was something about, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was featuring Andrew Yang, and they were trying to set up this experiment, this social experiment of can you do something effectively, and is there someone who's willing to run it? And they kind of used their podcast as a call for people who are interested in doing something like this. Mm-hmm. So they wouldn't have been able to
it's an ad.
Get to that point. Yeah, it is an ad, absolutely, right? But I feel like there's an intention there of wanting to do good. I don't know, maybe it's a benefit of the doubt, right? Giving them the benefit of the doubt and saying that they actually want to do something significantly interesting.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't have been able to get there without playing the game.
But again, it's content production, right? It's entertainment. It's not a service or a product. Like people will call entertainment a product, and I guess like to some extent it is, but in my mind it's a totally different world than what I would consider a product. A product is something that you use and get value from, whereas entertainment is something you consume and maybe get value from. It's very different in my mind.
I mean, so is that to suggest that there are no products that can be entertaining?
I mean, games are that way, but like
that's the obvious.
It's kind of like that's one of those weird ones where I don't know how to feel about it, because there's also you can play by yourself and entertain yourself, but you can also play with people. So it's like more of a platform idea. Presumably, it has an enduring value. Like you can play the game again. Mm-hmm. Right. Whereas something like entertainment for me is you don't typically reconsume it. Yeah, people will rewatch a movie or listen to music or something, but it's like durable versus non-durable goods. Like a product in my mind should be a durable good or something that, a video game isn't really a durable good, but again, it doesn't like denigrate. The problem I have with video games is like loot boxes and shit where you either have to pay to win, which is a whole kind of conversation, I think, or you get this like consumable good, that potion to get your health up, and you have to buy that. And the mechanic then becomes, how do we create something that keeps you engaged, not do we create a great game that you enjoy? And it totally flips it.
Yeah, this is a fascinating case study, right? So like Baldur's Gate 3 came out and made a huge splash because it didn't include any of those attention grabbing, keep you in the game kind of things, right?
Yep.
And there was a lot of quote unquote criticism for it sort of not doing those things and not standing up to what modern gaming is. But I think that's a good representation of that idea of whether you're on the side of capturing people, keeping them in the loop, squeezing the money that you can out of them, or just creating something for the sake of creating something that's really, really great, right?
Yeah, and most of the actual like studies I've seen on these is the people who tend to be the most valuable in those models are the people who have the addiction characteristics or gambling or those sorts of things, like video games for sure, but like any other sort of like time and attention thing, like people get addicted to it. And I think that's the big problem I have with it, is that if you sold them the world's greatest hammer and they carry it with them every day and they just love the product, I guess great, but you're not building the hammer so that it's the most addictive hammer that you could possibly make that is completely unable to be left at home, versus the entertainment-y, what I would consider non-product stuff is very much like, how do we keep you using it? And the point of a product shouldn't be manufactured use. It should be solving a problem fundamentally, or it should be providing value to you. And a lot of people argue, well, entertainment is value. Well, yeah, maybe, but when your economy or large percentages of your economy are based on entertainment, you get America.
Yeah.
And I don't know that anybody really going to argue that we're doing great. On either side of the political spectrum, it seems like everybody's pissed for some other different reason, but it seems fundamentally everybody agrees that nobody really wants to be in the condition that we're in.
Right. I mean, to clarify, to bring it sort of back to the middle, I don't think we're saying like entertainment has no value, right? Or we're just saying that those people who have gone down that path wanting to pursue this like endless, keep you in the simulation or their simulation kind of thing, right?
Well, value is hard. I maybe there's value, maybe there's not. Like value tends to be pretty deeply personal, but I don't think it's a product. And I don't think that product-minded people should be working that way, because that all of the apps that people are, I mean, it's even come into the lexicon, right? The kids are like, I'm addicted to Instagram. I'm like, that's bad. If somebody, 20 years ago, I'm addicted to alcohol, people would be like, okay, we need to help you. But here it's, oh my God, it's so addicting, it's great. No, that's not good. But we've because of these mechanisms to capture attention and entertainment are now so deeply embedded in what the human existence is, at least in this country. It's created all of these pathways to malformed behavior that, 15, 20 years ago, we would look at and be like, this is absolutely insane. And people are really good at doing things, right? So if we want to make the most addictive product possible, we fucking will.
Yeah.
It's probably an opiate. Right? Like,
we've already done it. Yeah.
Right. We're just going to have your brain go crazy. But then we say that's bad, right? We shouldn't just, put opiates in fucking candy, which we used to do. Yeah. Cocaine and Coca-Cola and stuff. It sells the product a lot more and people become literally addicted to it. But we said, no, Coca-Cola, you can't add a chemical to make your product addictive. But we're like, hey, Facebook, go make more money. Make it more addictive, right? Make Instagram more addictive.
Yeah.
I think that's really fucked up. And I think because it's tech and a lot of people don't understand it, then it becomes okay, right? And that's, again, like for me, the primary measurement is if you're looking at attention, you're trying to increase attention, that's indicative of your, putting the Coke in Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Which is why I'll probably never work in the Valley again.
You're set up your own valley.
Right. Well, you want your users to you want to understand how your users operate, but I find that talking to them, this radical concept, is way better than trying to infer from like data. Like the data is good because it also helps you check if someone's, oh yeah, I use the app all the time. And you're like, actually you don't, you haven't logged in 6 months or whatever. Then you kind of know, but doing traditional user experience kind of stuff, small group or shadowing, or even like screen recordings, right? You don't have to sit there and watch them do the thing, but if you can, record them doing it and the data, I think, can give you an indication of something to look at. So it's not that tracking like use or attention is bad, but what tends to happen is then it's how do we increase it? It's, well, why are we trying to keep people on our platform? How are we making money from that? I just think, or trapping people in your product. And I think, again, if you look at a physical good, like a refrigerator, you can't escape from, everybody buy one. It's everybody be like, no, that's crazy. But it's, well, the app, I can't live without this. It's really, is that where we're at? It's so deeply embedding in human psychology. I don't think most people, I don't think really recognize that. It's getting better. I think more people are talking about it, but
I mean, there's always going to be that division, right? Where, I don't know, maybe it's pessimistic, but I don't know that everyone will have that mindfulness to be aware that that's what's happening.
No.
Right. So this idea of the attention market, not many people will be even cognizant of something like this existing. Right?
And I think because this stuff's moving so fast, like generational gaps and generational knowledge loss is at like an all-time high. Mm-hmm. Right. When like radio came out, it was going to ruin the children. And even books, I remember in libraries, like that was when they're like, kids are going to read bad. We're going to forget how to tell stories because people are going to read them and not make them up. And that's probably true to some extent, right? Like we probably lost some stuff there, but I think like the net benefit of books was probably better than whatever we lost. And there's still people who practice oral traditions and that kind of stuff. But with the algorithms and, attention economy and that kind of stuff, like it's so baked into the lexicon. Like I'm of the age where I remember the world before the internet, and I lived in the world before the internet.
Yep.
Most people don't, and I think even most people in my age range don't. I see them have like succumb, right? I can't live without Instagram. It's my favorite. Or I get all my news from Instagram and all this shit. Like you're dependent on food and water. If you don't, you die. Right? You're dependent on oxygen. Well, mostly actually nitrogen and oxygen and a little bit of other gases in there, or you die. That's a dependency. But we, as humans, I think, rationalize what our brains want a lot of times, and people people who have a junk food addiction or alcoholism or something like that. So I need it. And well, there's a physiological dependency at some point with alcohol, but in order to get to that point, you have to like really try for most people. And so you're rationalizing, or your psychology is forcing you to kind of do something. But I mean, the alcohol industry, I guess, is advertising to you, and maybe they're predatory, but that's nothing compared to what Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or like any of these social media apps are doing. Like the brain poison is so embedded in the entire design of the entire, down to the phone, right? The red notification. Why is it red? Well, humans have a tendency to react to red.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds what you're basically getting at is people are lazy and not trying hard.
Yeah, I think partly, but also because of the way that this stuff is built and designed, and it's already so baked into our society, it's incredibly difficult to even recognize. So if you recognize it, if I'm sitting here talking about it and I go sit on Instagram for 2 hours, yeah, I'm lazy.
Yeah.
But I think they don't even recognize it. And there is, I think there does become a physiological or a psychological dependency on this stuff. Like people check their phones, like you get kind of twitchy almost. But it's a psychological addiction versus like a physical or physiological. Right, yes, they're kind of similar in some regards, and they can be, but it's such a gradual thing. And now it kills me every time I go out into society and I see a 2-year-old on an iPad.
Yeah.
We're training them from the very beginning, like bright flashy lights and quick movement and like all that. We're retraining. And it used to be you went outside and played, or maybe you had video games or something. It'd be like the same thing as I'm going to eat, 100 Hershey bars all day long, right? Sorry, Hershey, like your shitty chocolate.
No plugging.
No plug. We're not sponsored.
Wink, wink.
Yeah.
I mean, you could take it to the extreme. I think that's the idea behind the hesitation with the rampant technology that we have, and it's people becoming integrated with our phones, might as well absorb it into the human android amalgamation in the future kind of thing, right? And that's the fear, is that people will give into the immediate temptation and just spend all that time. If you have some magical implant, just sit there and watch videos all day or whatever, right?
Well, Apple had a series, I forget what it was called, but it was like a series on the end of the world, roughly, or it was like climate change and how stuff changes, and it was
it's not going where I thought it was going.
No, it actually is. It's going to directly relate to what you just said. Right. But every episode, there was time between, and I think it was like 5 to 10 years roughly. Each episode was like a leap forward. And so you start like kind of now, and it's just pretty normal. It's just like our society now. And then a few episodes in, you get to this like mythical technological future where you like can't breathe the air because it's so toxic, and humans have adapted to like have like little backpacks with like fucking oxygen, because of course we would do that, right? And then one of the episodes features somebody who has like a neural implant, and it's there's like a social introduction. They're at a party or whatever, and they walk up to these other two people. Like, oh hey, this is my whatever. If she was a wife or spouse or partner, I don't know. And she's sitting there and she's just kind of staring off into space, and then she just starts laughing. And then the guy is, I told you not to play that game when we came here. And it's some neuro implant that she's, like on her Facebook Farmville or whatever, but it's in her mind. And from the outside, it's totally bizarre because you have no idea what's going on, right? And she just starts, hysterically like interacting with this thing that no one else can see.
We'll see. I don't know. Do we want to see? I mean, that was where I was going to head next was, where do you go from here, right? Being mindful of it, being aware of it is one part of it. Is there anything you can do about it? Do you just sort of let things play out, or do you try and do something about it? How does it?
Yeah, I think we need some kind of existential immediate problem to solve it. Because I've been involved in like climate stuff and the environment stuff for a long time. Like I grew up outside for the most part, so I've been kind of in it the whole time. And not that like my parents are like radical environmentalist hippies or anything, but I grew up outside. Like that's what I did. I was outside a lot, and I enjoy being outside to this day. And so I was really getting involved in the climate movement or whatever the fuck you want to call it. And I found very quickly that the people who should be doing the most to prevent any kind of harm generally don't give a fuck. Like I went to, I probably won't name it. I went to a thing when I moved to Portland, and it's it's a well-known environmentalist group. They've also known to do some extreme things to oil.
You're not going to say who they are.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, there's a few of them. There's a plausible deniability. So I went to one of their meetings, and I'm not going to go blow up an oil field or anything because that creates an ecological disaster, which I think is stupid. But I mean, the point is these are like the hardcore, and these are not your like, Prius driving liberal kind of people. These are like hardcore people who are in the weeds and technical policy details. And I get there, and this is my first meeting, and we spend 30 minutes talking about anything other than climate stuff. And then we talk about whatever the issue of the moment was. I think it was some pipeline that they were trying to build in Colorado. I'm like, well, it's not in Portland, so why do I care? Yeah, I care, but I can't do anything about it. It's Colorado.
It's halfway across country.
And then we go to leave, and I biked in. Biking is my primary method of transportation other than my feet. And everybody got in their car and left. And it struck me of just like fucking crazy, right?
So it reminds me of like you have the international panel, the climate panel, and everyone's flying in
private jets, right? Yeah, they're like, well, I can't fly commercial. I'm too famous. Yeah. And I was like, that's really strange. I kind of reflected a little bit on that. And I understand like some people need cars, like you have a family or you have some, you work or whatever. But Portland's got great public transit. We're a very bikeable city. It was a really nice day. It was in the upper 70s. There's no logical reason I could find not to bike other than you just. And if it would have been other people, I think it would have. But I think I was literally the only person who biked. There might have been one other person, and there was like probably 50 people there.
Yeah.
I was like, there's something really fucked up here. And then I went to another organization similar without the more extreme. That was the same thing. I think 2 people took the bus. I biked, a couple other people biked, and then a vast majority of people got in their car and left. You claim to care about the environment, but you're contributing. Like 1/3 of emissions are cars, personal auto. And it's gotten now to the point where people are rationalizing, well, electric cars will solve everything. Well, where does the electricity come from? Where does the batteries come from? How do you get the battery? What ecological impact is that?
Right.
How do you recycle this shit? Right? You're offsetting the problems, and maybe by the math, there's like less carbon output from an electric car, but there's still a shit ton more compared to me walking on my feet, or biking, or just not taking that trip across town. And then it's become that people are rationalizing that. People like I know personally, and like a lot of these organizations, well, you can't just go back to the Stone Age, but what you care about the environment and you're contributing to it. So this is a really like long kind of personal, I guess, anecdote of, no, I don't think people are really capable of self-organizing to correct deeply difficult or psychological things because I haven't seen evidence of it.
Right. Yeah.
Ever in history, right? I can't see the greenhouse gases. It's not a problem.
Yeah. I think that this idea has come up in a few of our conversations, but it's like people, if they're not aware of something, like it's the unknown stuff.
Yeah.
Right? If they're not cognizant of it. I think it's different if they are not aware and they're doing this versus if you had brought up their attention and they didn't change their behavior. I think the latter's much worse than the former. Right?
Yeah, I think it's like cars are convenient, 100%, right? Like I get that. But I don't want to give up my convenience. So I'm going to get a greener car. Okay, I guess that's maybe an improvement. I think you can actually debate the greenness of an electric vehicle or a hybrid vehicle. Yes, it consumes less oil, but oil is not the only part of the car ecosystem that pollutes. Like tires, super polluting. They create all sorts of microparticles. Just like all the paints and all this, it's like it. And I talk to people about this, and then they like try to push it back on me, like I'm the problem. And I'm like, well, no, like this is all factual stuff. Like recycling is another great example of this. Like recycling doesn't happen so far as I can tell, especially from a consumer perspective, right? Like maybe like big industrial like plants are like recycling shit, but like when you go throw your plastic in the recycling bin,
it's dumped in with everything else.
Yeah, it probably gets burned or landfilled at this point. We used to ship it to China, and they used to try to make shit out of it, and they don't do it anymore because they're like this. Nobody wants it. Number one, and number two, it's also really toxic to recycle. But yet, everybody, it's fine. It's recyclable. It's no. Reduce, reuse, recycle, right? Reduce is always the number one thing you should do. And what I'm seeing though is we've created this mindset of shifting it. So I don't put gas in my car, therefore it's less polluting than if I put gas in my car, even though you're plugging in electricity, which is probably coming from coal or natural gas, even though your utility company says it's renewable.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you don't see that, so it's not a problem, right? It's just you've abstracted that out.
I think there's like a common trend here, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier too with the attention stuff. I think there's a thing with scale, and I think I thought of this because when you talk about recycling or your impact, your climate impact, there's the looming argument of the individuals don't really make a difference. It's the big people, the big stuff that actually matters.
Yes and no. Like does my not having a car and driving make a measurable impact? Yes. Is that impact
at scale though? Is
that impact negated by like literally anything else happening? Probably.
Yeah, right? I think that's what I was trying to get at was like, there's the absolute impact versus the relevant impact. Yeah, but part of it is you need the big guys to also contribute. Yeah. Right? So if everyone individually were not, say everyone were giving into the psychological addiction, or if everyone were choosing the convenience of the car, do you fault the individual, or do you move it up the responsibility chain and say, okay, so people can't do this. So if there were an organization who could, or that could, quote unquote, leave it to them.
So two misnomers. My individual contributions to this probably negligible in the grand scheme of things. However, if 1 million of me do this, or 100 million of me do this, that's a huge impact. It's very measurable. Secondly, the big producers, I hear that argument a lot as well. Well, who consumes their products? Individuals, right? They're not just making fucking shit and putting it in the pit next to them because they can, right? It's like people are consuming the products of these producers. And so again, it's a psychological kind of philosophical way to undo your own personal responsibility by saying, well, if I drive my car and everyone else is going to drive their car, the plane's going to run anyway. To some extent that's true, but eventually that demand and market collapses. But if people continue to use it, then it's not going to collapse and it's going to grow. And that's what's been happening. Like greenhouse gas emissions are still growing. Mm-hmm. Right? The Paris Agreement's fucking nonsense. And then people, America, China, India, blah, blah, blah. And it's, the people should stop buying shit. It's not like we're just burning oil for the sake of burning oil. Like it's producing stuff.
Yeah. I don't intend to simplify by saying it's one or the other, right? But there's like a traveling up and down the chain, I guess, right? So when you say, oh, India, China, US, whatever, it's the responsibility of those governments to influence individuals such that they adopt this kind of high individual contribution.
Yeah, and China's influencing their population to buy more because it's stimulating their economy. India is the same way. And I would argue America's just been there. Right?
Welcome to the club.
Well, and yeah, I get it to some extent too. It's America and the West has used hydrocarbons to grow to where they are today. And now we're saying don't use them. And so that kind of shortens the chain. But I was just listening to an economic forecast for energy production, and China produces so much solar capacity that nobody else in the world can compete because it's just not profitable. They've just flooded the market, and then nobody buys it.
Yeah.
Right. So and I don't know if that's partly just to put people to work and make shit that they think is useful, and someone will come along and buy it, or if they're actually trying to collapse the whatever the fucking problem is, who cares? But like all I hear is green energy, green energy, green energy. It's cheaper and cheaper and cheaper because it's more and more produced. So, but why is there a supply demand, or why is there a demand lag? Right? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So I don't know, man. I'm not a fatalist, but at the same time, I don't see any evidence to the contrary that like large or hard abstracted problems are solved. And people push back all that, well, we're getting better on climate. And I'm like, maybe, but greenhouse gas emissions are still going up. We're selling more cars than ever, less electric vehicles. The most popular vehicle in America is still a giant truck. Okay, maybe we have more solar capacity, but that just seems to be
fueling more
demand. Yeah. And okay, it's not oil, so I guess that's better, but the demand is not decreasing. And frankly, I've had this argument with a lot of people. It's just the economics don't support that. Like, the economics are predicated on growth. If you degrow, you lose. Nobody is going to invest in that, right? So there is an efficiency coefficient that you can mess with, but like this idea that we just stop producing and everything's fine, like the entire world collapses. It's a really, really challenging problem, and I don't hear anyone even really talking. Like Gore for a while there was trying to kind of talk through, and it's really hard and complicated, but then he went to a hedge fund. So, and he flies to all his climate shit on his private jet. I lost a lot of respect for him when he was doing the tour for the movie he did, the Times or whatever. Yeah, he would fly his private jet.
Yeah.
Come on, bro. Can't even fly like first class. And I understand, it's probably more efficient for him to do that, but you're trying to tell me that I should not use plastic bags when you fly in on your private jet. Got it. He fucking hypocrite. I still don't try to use plastic bags. Right? I still try to do the right thing. Even I'm not perfect, right? I fly around and shit too, but it's also, I try to not have as much impact, and I try to decrease my consumption. But it's frustrating when I see people like Gore, flying around in his private jet. He has the means, right? If anybody in the world, like,
it's gonna go on forever.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. What have you been up to?
Let's try to move it to a lighter note.
Start with existential dread. There's only up from there, right?
I've been all right. I've been trying to catch up on a few things. I think I just came back from New York, so I was at a neuromodulation conference, which was super fun, very interesting. It was a very academic conference, so not your just. I was going to say not your standard networking conference. It was definitely networking, but it was more for academics. So people sharing sort of like the latest and greatest, which is really, really good to see. One way to rapidly accelerate your learning is to go to one of these conferences to kind of see what's going on. But it also, to some of the conversations we've had before, and just in the past, really seeing sort of the extent of what we currently know and can do versus what's put in practice, and recognizing that discrepancy. And so we talked before about this device that I'm trying to build out.
The Clockwork Orange helmet.
Yeah, I see a better approach, or I see the value of doing something like it, even though you have the experts of experts claiming that it's not quite ready yet. I think it sort of takes that let's just kind of throw it out there and see what happens attitude that will either prove or disprove whether those experts are right. So I think it's been a good time well spent to see that, and sort of seeing, picking out experts in the field and seeing who would be valuable to use or to have as a support system, if champions, basically, because you kind of need that for something like this. That being said, also recognizing how much more work there is to do.
Did you get any inspiration for like next steps?
Absolutely. I think there's no secret. There's no point in keeping anything secret here. Like, one of the things I wanted to try and facilitate with this device was this sort of low cost remote administration of this protocol, this transcranial direct current stimulation. And there were people at this conference who have developed this remote administration protocol. So going to their talks and seeing how they're doing things, I learned from them what their usability issues were. So they have some devices, or there's a company that builds a device that can facilitate remote connections or remote sessions, administrating these remote sessions. And then hearing what these what would you even call them? These trial runners having to sit on Zoom sessions with people wearing this headset, and then trying to remotely tell them, oh, you got to tweak it a little here or there.
So it's kind of like telehealth, but with a physical.
Yeah, telehealth with a device. Basically telehealth with a device, exactly. Like seeing and hearing about their issues. That's okay. As someone who's built or who can build products, that seems like it's a no-brainer to do.
Yeah.
So why not improve on that experience and sort of minimize the need for this sort of hands-on or face-to-camera time with people. And then there's this big question around standardization of parameters. So when you have this session, you can sort of tweak any of these hundreds of knobs. And one of the reasons why a clear judgment on whether something works or not is because you have so many different people running so many different trials using so many different parameters. So can you start to standardize, quote unquote, standardize, or enable this platform to do the big data approach of looking at what parameters people are using and sort of aggregate that and see the results?
Is there any correlation between like your current brainwave pattern and how you would do the adjustment?
Yes.
Right? Because like that's my first, if you built a device that would kind of scan you, so to speak.
Yeah.
And you get a little bit of a baseline, and then as you're, doing the magnet stuff, theoretically you would see a change.
I think that's kind of the holy grail of a lot of this space, and not just this space, but we talked about this too, wearables in general. You sort of need that feedback loop, this closed loop process by which you have, it's a combination of like hyper personalization plus this read act.
Well, and a lot of it's perception too, right? There may or may not be like a detectable brainwave change. Who knows? Maybe we can detect it, maybe we can't. But if it's working for somebody and it's not harmful, like it works, right? There's like a perception coefficient. And I think I sent you a couple of them, but there's some interesting kind of placebo studies where they'll wire people up and not do the thing or do the thing and kind of see if it has the effect. And there's definitely a placebo effect with this, right? I mean, that's just the placebo. I guess for folks who might not know, a placebo effect is basically your brain or yourself tricking yourself into thinking that some sort of intervention or therapy is working when there's no evidence to suggest that it is. So it's the sugar pill thing I'm sure a lot of people have heard about, where they'll do a clinical study with a pharmaceutical drug, and then they'll give you basically a sugar pill, which is not really, I guess technically it's a drug, but it's not whatever they're trying to treat you with. And you'll have a percentage of people who report positive effects from the sugar pill, which there shouldn't be any other than your psychology. That's interesting, and maybe that's not a bad thing either, but you also want to make sure that there's like a lasting effect. Oftentimes the placebo effect is very short term.
Yeah. I mean so that's actually a very good, one of the things I like to bring up when we talk about placebo effect, or when anyone talks about placebo effect. There's a study where I think it's some sort of leg injury, where the standard procedure was to implant, I think it's like a bone cement or some replacement for some bone or something like that. And there was a study showing that that whole procedure was all placebo effect. So you didn't have to implant at all. So like to figure it out, and I'm going to get some of these details wrong. double check it. But there's a doctor who would go through with the surgery, cut them open and stitch them back up and not do anything else. Just cut them open and stitch them back up to make them think that they got the surgery.
Yeah.
And they were blinded, so they had no idea whether they received it or not. And they got better. And this was not a short-term thing. It was like they got better. So it's a very fascinating idea.
Well, and I think it depends what it is. There's something to be said for like positive thought, positive psychology. You know, a lot of people who meditate will swear by it. Yeah, that definitely does work and it has lasting impact. But when it comes to something like cancer, there's a lot of people who will claim that, you know, you just positively, mind shift the cancer away. And it's there's no evidence that that's true at all. And there is like spontaneous remission is a thing where your body just figures out how to deal with the cancer and it either subsides or goes away, but it's incredibly rare and you can't trigger that with your mind, folks. Like it just doesn't work that way. So that's interesting though, with like the surgery thing. I'd love to have been on that review board. So you're going to cut people open and stitch them up, but not anything,
right? I have no idea how
to that. Yeah.
I have no idea how he's able to get that. The placebo thing is certainly one of the other things that people are talking about, right? But there are quote unquote protocols for how do you blind people. Yeah. Kind of the idea behind some of the things that I would like to do with this platform is to facilitate some of that.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the extra parameters that you have to take into account, right?
Well, that'd be really easy to do too. You have a red light or something that goes on and you just don't do anything when the red light goes on, right? Like, people think it's working. Yeah. That's really cool. How did you find out or just go to it? Did you have, apparently you didn't have to have any kind of credential, or did you?
No, I had to pay. I had to have enough money to pay to go.
It sounds like an academic conference.
Yeah, exactly.
So that you can pay and it doesn't bounce. All right, you're in.
Yeah, I mean, I think, on the more personal level, like my goal was to have some sort of prototype or something where I could, to demo or something like that. But intellectually humbling, was not able to get the prototype done by the time I was going to this conference. I really do think I could have leveraged that if I did have it. But in general, a lot of these conferences are, unless you have something to share or you have something to give, then you're not making the most of the connections. But it was still very nice to go and talk to people and kind of poke their brains.
Did they put it online at all? Like I know even a lot of academic conferences are starting to, like, if you can't make it, they record them.
They do. I mean, I've also encountered this where people say they'll put up recordings, but they're not always available. But these are, I think they should be available. I did get an email saying that they would put these up.
That's cool. I mean, there's a slight cost to that kind of stuff, but it's so minuscule. And again, just like getting information out there and sharing it is something I'm really interested in. And it's also surprising that we don't do that. In my mind, everything should just be recorded, not like Big Brother 1984 kind of thing, but, in a work environment, why not? What are you afraid of? And we've created all these, legal punitive systems and shit. So everybody's afraid of everything, but it's free and you can refer back to it. And it's so much easier to like come up to speed on stuff if there's documentation, or you can understand like why people are thinking about what they were in that point in time. Especially like historical stuff, like as you're iterating, you often don't even understand what's going on until you've got some sort of inflection point. And if you don't have the documentation, you don't know why.
Right. Yeah. But for the record, you're not being a hypocrite because you're recording this right now.
I suppose. Yeah. I mean, there are I totally believe in privacy and private conversations and stuff like that too. But when it comes to when you're in an environment doing stuff or trying to you're in a work environment, I think we place way too much focus on secrecy. Or the importance of it. I saw an anecdote that anybody who is not being transparent and or withholding information is just being dishonest, because in a transparent situation, there's nothing, you can't dispute it, right? So it's like a power kind of play to if I'm going to withhold information or I'm going to not give all the details, then I'm basically trying to manipulate the situation, and in transparent environments, it's just impossible because everybody has the same information.
Okay. So this is a very interesting topic, actually. So there's I think there's an idea out there called I don't remember the exact name, but it relates to communication, and I think when you have everything transparent, the sheer amount of information out there, one, is ineffective for people to communicate, because you're expecting people to go through the entire chain of events and have to sort of re-establish
the message board problem.
Yeah, exactly, right.
I hate fucking message boards. I hate them.
But the idea of manipulation, I think that generally has a negative connotation. But in the communication scenario where you're intentionally eliminate information that you don't feel is actually valuable to the conversation, and you may, it's your judgment, you may be right, you may be wrong about that, but I think there's something like when I'm getting caught up on an issue, I don't need you to tell me, the whole story. Just tell me what I need to know so that I can make a decision, kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I agree with that, but it's if you're reading a financial statement and you only talk about the revenue.
Yeah.
Right? And you don't make the rest of the information available, nobody can check either. Right. And not that most people do, but again, it's the asymmetrical nature of information is a huge problem. And
that's why we have game theory.
I know, right? And a lot of people shit on tech again, but like a lot of people in the tech world claim to be so transparent, but if you actually critically think through what they're saying or the information that they're giving, it's clearly a very one-sided opinion. And it's really easy to tell this because any sort of criticism is usually just sloughed off or just not addressed. Yeah. And not that you have to address every critic, you get trolls and shit that'll just burn your time, but if it's a single stream of information and it's a single dialogue, that's a huge problem. And it should be indicative for folks that there's a huge problem, or potentially a huge problem. Maybe that's just so good. But, that's how you get Instagram. Oh, it doesn't hurt people. It doesn't hurt people. It doesn't hurt people. Oh, maybe it hurts people. But, they can we have filters now. You can turn this stuff off. You're already addicted, right? It's like you're addicted to heroin. Well, you can stop anytime you want, right? Yeah.
Slippery slope, frog boiling in the water. Yeah.
That's cool, man. How long do you think before you have a
That's a very good question. That's a great question.
I think a couple of weeks ago you were supposed to show me something, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't even make anything up. I have no idea. I'm still trying to catch up on all the other stuff I'm doing. So I hope to have more progress in a month or so. I think I'm starting to get back into the groove of it. And anytime you're building something and it doesn't work the way you expect it to work, you sort of get demoralized. especially since it should be easy. And no, it's not that easy. So you have to break it down and then you put it back together again. Yep. And the integration element of it works when you break it down, but then when you put it back together again, it doesn't work and you got to figure out why. Yeah. So it's very, very humbling to know that the world's never as easy as you want it to be.
No, I'm hitting that same thing. My app is like 99% ready to be released.
Yeah,
I'm still fighting with fucking payments, man.
Yeah.
It's
payments to get your app approved, or is it like the integration of payments into the app?
Yes.
Got it.
So I got my app was approved by the almighty Apple. Tim Apple approved it.
Nice.
I guess the line of thinking, which might be helpful if people actually listen to this, would be I want the most minimal viable products to be released. So I know I have a market. I know I have people who are interested in it. I have people using it, but I don't know how big that is. And so I was talking with someone actually last night about this, and I thought I had laser focus as a product person before. I have such a heightened level of laser focus now where, because I'm pretty much doing the work. I have some help here and there, but it's like, I want to build the MVP the way that I want it to. I want to get the scaffolding there before I bring in more people, because I'm doing AI stuff, but like a lot of what I found in this is, and I talk to people about this shit, and a lot of people try to talk me out of it. Oh, that's not a product, or it's like, you don't get what I'm doing, and that's okay. One, it's weird you're trying to talk me out of it. Like, just don't use it. Right. Let me waste my time, I guess. If that's
Let me waste my time.
I don't care.
That's a sticker.
Yeah, right. But yeah, like, why are you so invested in trying to convince me that this is not a good idea? Like, I'm not making you use it, right? But number two, it's like people I'm working on contextual search for audio, and as far as I can tell, this isn't really a thing. Like, it's a thing in certain industries. It's a thing in certain niches, there are, some tools like Perplexity AI as a contextual search engine. They kind of have an audio coefficient, and I don't know, I have some more stuff in there. But as far as I can tell, I've done market research. There's really nothing that just gives you a generalized platform to do this. And people, why is that valuable? I was like, well, why is Google valuable? When they're making Google, like the problem was obvious in that it's really hard to understand what websites are out there and how to find stuff. That's been a human problem since time began. But then Google, figured out a way to do it, and then it worked really, really well compared to Alta Vista or, Yahoo search or whatever, where it wasn't worked very well. And so then it became this like necessity tool for you. And now it's ubiquitous, right? Like you go to probably Google, like maybe you go to Bing or something, but you don't know what life is like without it. But I don't know, 30 years ago, everyone was like, life's fine, right? What's the internet? Why do I need that? So, and I'm not saying I'm creating the next Google. I don't want to do that, right? I mean, it sounds, but I don't honestly think that will happen. I frankly don't want to build that kind of a company. But I do think for some identified use cases and also just things that I personally struggle with, I think it's going to be incredibly valuable. And so the idea is to most minimal viable product. What is the most minimal thing to get it out to people so that they can start telling me if it's useful or not? Then I decided, so after I got it approved, I was like, well, I should just make it easy for people to pay me, right? If they find value in this, like instead of just kind of throwing out a demo or like a beta and like letting people, I was like, fuck it, it's just payments. It can't be that hard in 2024. And so I started integrating it. And then Apple had all sorts of other criteria that they wanted me to solve for. I got through most of that, but then the problem I'm having now is that the software I'm using to create my front end for the app, the actual stuff that people download and use, right? Apple has all of these conditions to be able to test payments that you have to use their own software, Xcode. There's no other way to do it. And I think that's insane, number one. And so I brought in, I exported the code, put in the code in Xcode, ran it. I have all these problems with all these dependencies for all sorts of reasons that, anybody who's done development was probably like, yeah, I saw that coming. Yeah. And part of it is for me it's really frustrating, one, that there is no easy way to test this. It's crazy to me because it works. Like all the code works, right? I mean, everybody who's done coding's and then you run it and it doesn't. So I do want to test it and do my due diligence, but it creates this whole other circumstance and all this other crap that I frankly don't want to deal with that I now have to deal with. And so talking about demoralizing earlier, I was just, as anybody who's been through dependency hell, it really sucks. And I don't do this for a living full time. Like technically, I guess I do now, but it's not my passion. But I do want to get the initial vision out there and then bring in people to help build it better or remake it in a better way, because it's such an abstract meta idea for folks that they don't grasp. Even people who kind of get it are like, I get it, but I don't really get it. And then when you see it, you're like, oh, that's what it does. And it looks so simple. And anyway, so yeah, I don't know. I get that. And then it's also just like challenging to just continue at it, right? Because and like someone who does this all the time and works with all the code, that the different frameworks and stuff, couple hours, right? Probably. For me, it's like
a couple of hours inflated every once in a while, depending on what kind of stupid bug you're running into.
Well, that's just it, right? It's like at the surface too. It's just a dependency. You just solve that dependency. Well, what I found is that every time I change a dependency, I get a new dependency error, which is dependency hell for folks who aren't familiar. And eventually you can solve that, but it just takes a shit ton of fucking time to try to figure out what you can cut or what version of whatever. And the other reason I don't really want to do this, again, going back to minimum viable product, is that I'm hoping this shit just gets fixed in the next version of something. Right? Because I don't want to spend all this time and energy solving this problem.
If anything, it gets worse.
I know, right? I know.
But I mean, like for anybody listening out there, if they have any ideas around fixing this dependency hell, reach out, because this is a real problem in the developer space for multiple use cases. But coding has become so ubiquitous, and it's only becoming worse with this dependency problem, right? So it's like, how do you ensure that you have the latest code or code of a specific version? How do you make sure breaking changes don't propagate down or up, right? So it's a really messy problem.
Well, and what I'm finding too is a lot of it's documentation.
It's but then the problem is like, how do you keep the documentation up to date?
Yeah, because like I built this library or whatever, and then it needed these things, and so I go to build it, and all those things changed, but I don't know that they were required because, especially I'm using Flutter, and Flutter has the ability to produce logic for version dependencies, so you can say greater than or equal to this version. Which seems at the surface like an easy way to kind of get out of dependencies, but it's even worse because I go to the that doesn't work. Okay, so I go to the next most recent version. Okay, well now that doesn't work, and all this other stuff now doesn't work. Right. And it's interesting because like the contextual search problem I'm trying to solve for with audio is kind of this problem of like, how do you navigate a web that's non-obvious or has so many dimensions and layers that it's very, very difficult to just kind of pinpoint a thing. Yeah. It's like a complex series of knowledge graphs, right? It's once you build it, it's brilliant and it fucking works great. But actually building that is really difficult. And that's, I think, now I'm thinking out loud, but I'm like almost thinking like that could be an interesting like technology solve for like, how do you effectively like version your dependency chain?
Yep. Yeah, I
know that's the thing in some languages and libraries, but it's also
it's like a weird informal adoption. Like Semver is one way of doing it, but then you again sort of rely on the individuals who maintain that code to do it properly. And everyone interprets things a little differently. Everyone, or someone drops the ball or something like that, and then I'm guilty of that too, where we have internal versions and you forget that you needed to bump a version, or you bumped a version and didn't make that a dependency. So
or you added some stuff in that you kind of forgot you added, and then now you introduced a bunch of it. I do this to myself all the time, where I push a version to my app and I'll be like, oh shit, I actually added way more stuff than I probably should have, and I need to take some stuff out.
One thing I wanted to preface, I don't know if you want to leave this in, so I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap. In order for you to demo one of the things the Huberman Lab has done is they've done this search within their own episodes. So if you search for a phrase or a topic, it'll search through every single podcast that he's done and give you the timestamp. So I think that's like the one way of people seeing what contextual search looks like. And then the next layer is, not just searching overall Huberman. Exactly. Right.
That's effectively like the back end, right? I'm working through that. To do that in a single context is pretty straightforward. I haven't actually built the search function yet, but I have the data, and that's effectively what I'll be doing. And like how to do that's actually really straightforward, or at least in the surface. I don't know, weaving it together, there's a couple technologies that I'm playing with that are relatively new that I'm hoping solve some of those complexities. Like it'll probably introduce other complexities too. I had lunch with somebody who's working on platforms for this kind of stuff, and we were chatting a little bit and just kind of sharing stories.
What's this kind of stuff? What are you referring to specifically?
I'm trying to give a detail without outing people.
Sure. Okay. It's more of a curiosity question.
AI/ML platform stuff.
Okay.
Right. I sent you the link to the GitHub.
Okay. All right.
So that's part of it. But we were talking and we were just kind of just chatting, and there's a lot of known problems with search. Search is really hard for folks, but one of the solutions that I proposed to conquering a lot of that was something that they had not thought of before. And part of it is like what the app is predicated on, but part of it's also like how you leverage that. And again, I think part of the problem with my app too is like the app interface that people are interacting with, which is I'm focused on podcasts initially and searching podcasts. That's not the product. The product is the platform to make the magic happen. Right. But people don't get that. And even I have some really smart friends who are like, yeah, but why podcasts? And I'm like, well, why not? Number one. Number two, I got to start somewhere, right? I have to narrow the problem of audio search. And it's also, there's a cost coefficient because it does cost money to like peer into audio, so to speak. But
a lot of money.
And it's also really hard to, we've talked a little bit about this, but like I'm working on, self-uploading audio for analysis or whatever you want to do. But that's really actually a hard problem to make that scalable, right? It's not, I just put the file in and it just works.
Yeah, and cost effective. Yeah.
Right. And so, that I know as soon as I release it, that's going to be the first request that people are going to have. I want to just be able to pick my own shit. I'm working on it. And there's some clever shit that I'm doing. And there's some stuff that I just haven't solved that I just keep kicking down the road. I'm now purchasing GPUs en masse.
Yes, I'm so excited to see what outcomes you have.
I got my first shipment yesterday.
You have to send me your component list for your build.
Yeah, well, and then people too, like, this is actually something I want to talk about too, but people like look down on it. Like, you're building your own hardware, like some kind of, I'm like, no, like that's actually the only way to do this. Like,
I don't think people realize that yet.
No.
I don't know if you want this out there, but this is a way cheaper way in the age that we're moving in to move fast on this LM, not even LM, machine learning in general.
Yeah, it depends. I don't know if I'll cut this or not either. I think it depends on the problem you're trying to solve in ML and AI. And so like my problem right now is mostly memory dependence. Like the speed of the computation is always helpful and it's always good. Yeah. But I've gotten to the point where I'm okay with the speed that I'm getting with the stack that I'm using. And I'm limited by memory and of being able to run models at different sizes and parallelization and all this shit. And like people who are really into it probably yelling, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about." No, I actually, for my specific problem in this specific part of the pipeline, I am memory limited. Like computation is not nearly as important as people think it is. And I think we talked about it too, but I did the math and like to hit the scale of capacity that I need, my projected capacity that I think I'll need, it's $80,000 in equipment.
Yeah.
And that's 9 months of rental from the cloud of a shitty kind of GPU. Like those aren't like H100s or A100, I mean, you're talking to rent one of those, you're probably looking at $2,000 to $3,000 a month. You can buy one for $10,000 to $15,000. So I understand the cloud. I mean, we've talked a lot about my philosophy on the cloud is very different than a lot of people because I used to have to do shit in the world before the cloud. But owning your own infrastructure and running your own infrastructure is one of the secrets to this kind of AI shit right now that a lot of people are not getting.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not even it's even people who need to find out how to use it, right? Like it's cost prohibitive to do experimentation.
Yep.
So if you own your infrastructure now, and then you actually figure out how to use it, you're set, you're good. Right? You need to scale, but you're good.
Yeah. And I think too, like there's been all sorts of revolutions in model building and training that you can use less everything than you think you need. It just takes more time. Right. Yeah. If I had an H100, I could throw a bunch of model stuff at it, do some training, or had 100 of them or whatever, or 1,000.
Tech in general moved that direction. Use more compute, use more RAM.
Yeah, and there's trade-offs to doing some of this stuff. But for what I'm doing and the problems I'm trying to solve, it's just a waiting game at that point. And I can wait a few days or weeks if I need to versus spending the money. And I think that's going back to that laser focus. It's like, how am I spending my time? How am I deploying my resources? And then it comes to resources, as I'm bootstrapping, I'm not interested in venture capital. And I kind of got going down this path of buy versus build versus rent kind of thing. And it was really clear to me very quickly that any sort of scale in this space, like you should be owning. And the next generation's going to come out. It's going to be better. It's going to be faster. Probably not cheaper. I'm sure they're going to juice the profits. But like, theoretically, it'll be cheaper. But again, and I find this is part of my problem of wanting to do this too, because I've talked to a lot of engineering friends and they're telling me I need all of this like fucking infrastructure. And I'm like, I actually don't, because I'm literally running this today on what I have and I'm building out for a little bit more scale, but it works. Don't tell me it doesn't. And we're not talking like it takes weeks to produce this stuff. It's minutes or hours. I think a lot of the cost of startups goes into like the whiz bang fancy, and the capital allocators don't seem to be smart enough to understand this, or they think that it's just going to be faster. And like talking through dependency hell, like you start talking about deployment hells, and deployment chains and shit. Like that's a whole nother level of complexity that you have to deal with. And maybe you need that. Maybe like I've told people straight out, like the day I have to use Kubernetes is the day I'm shutting down.
But you can use Kubernetes on a small scale.
I know, right? And there's ways around. I still have redundancy and high availabilities in without using it.
Yeah. Don't overcomplicate it if you can get it to work.
Fuck no. And
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm. We'll have to talk off recording about some of the infrastructure stuff because it's. I am productionizing my pipeline, which is why I'm buying GPUs now. So I have it all working the way that it needs to work.
Yeah.
And kind of like
we have talked a little bit about that. You need to go live. Yeah.
A dev environment, but I'm actually making it production. It's so funny because I'm reading, what is it? Into the Plex, the Google Plex? In the Plex, it's called. So it's a book about the founding of Google. It's pretty old, actually. It's not recent, but I started reading that a couple of days ago, and it's so funny because that's what they did to found Google, right? Larry was really into costs of stuff, and part of the problem they were having is that the typical data center, when they got to data center scale, you would get a cage, which is a certain amount of racks depending on the data center. It's usually like 6 to 12, something like that. And it's literally just kind of a chained off section of the warehouse that the data center's in, and that's your little area. And people were buying, standard issue servers. Then there was only, I think the numbers they gave in the book were like 100 servers per cage or something at the time. They figured out a way to quadruple it to the point where the data center had to bring in additional cooling and power because they're like, you shouldn't be able to do this. And then, but they figured out a way to, build their own kind of thing. So and not every company needs to do this. If you have, especially some sort of an on-demand, like the cloud generation or cloud AI is pretty good. Like you don't need to, but if you're actually building an AI company or a company that like AI is an integral part and you don't own at least some of your infrastructure. Like I've talked about this before too. Like I can flip over to the cloud at any minute.
Right.
And just pay, right? But running my own infrastructure, the numbers, it's just, the math is just so fucking simple and clear.
Yeah.
But using the cloud as like that scale or that safety valve is a strategy that I don't see a lot of people using either. And being able to scale up quickly if I get demand is something I do. And then I can, buy or build more as I go. So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that flip over is not trivial. Going from local to...
for me it is.
Yeah. Well,
maybe I'm actually a good engineer and I just don't think I am because I'm like, like the flip over is, I don't know, 5 lines of code.
Okay, good.
So, I mean, it's a manual. Like I have to hit the go button, so to speak. But I mean, automating that, very straightforward. Actually, now I'm thinking about it, and it'd be just basically queue management.
Yeah.
And everybody at home's queue management, that's fucking hard. And I'm like, not the way that I do it.
All right. Well, I mean, so if you are feeling a little demoralized, I don't know if you operate this way, but an accountability partner. So next time we talk, will you have what would you like to have done?
I want the fucking app to be released, man. Like,
all right, cool.
Because it works. That's the frustrating part for me is it's like, it fucking works. I want people to be able to give me money.
Yeah.
I run a business, not a charity. And I think maybe in thinking on that, it's really important. So again, I wanted to get the concept I was working on was like, get it out and have kind of like a demo mode that's a full feature, but a segment of what the thing can do.
Yeah. Trial period or whatever.
Yeah. And then figure out the purchase thing later. And then I was thinking about it and, people fall off really quickly. And if it's something that people actually want to purchase, I should not make that 2 weeks later. Yeah. So it's like a business decision, so to speak. So yeah, I really want that to be out. And people are starting to give me shit. They're like, oh, I thought you were releasing. I'm like, yeah, it's pretty much ready to go. But I have this one little problem that should not be a problem. And purchasing works in the closed beta, funny enough.
I'm not buying anything from you.
So I didn't know this until I was talking to somebody and was pissed, and I was like, yeah, that fucking thing doesn't work. And I like launched the app on my phone and I clicked buy and it worked. And I was like, oh, that's cool. But in test flight, as far as I can tell, they don't let you actually purchase.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, because it says like when I hit the button to purchase, it says like this is a sandbox purchase. The full functionality will be available.
I don't know. That might be a setting you can set in test flight. Because we do this internally, and we have a test flight version, and you can make transactions.
Okay, well that's good then, because so I was fighting with the dependency hell, and then I realized this works. Then I started just pushing 1,000 versions to test flight because I'm like, well, it seems to work, right? And I can kind of keep moving. But yeah, so I want it like publicly accessible, and I want to be able to take people's money.
Okay. All right.
And then the infrastructure stuff, yeah, like I would love, 2 weeks? I probably won't get to it, but I would love to have, and I'm traveling too. I would love to have like a demoable search function to show you. Probably won't do that publicly, but nerd out a little bit on some of the insides.
Wait, did we? I don't remember if we talked about Play Store. Why haven't you tried Play Store first?
First, I don't native Android. Just I have an iPhone and iOS, and I assumed that Apple's process would be better.
No.
It seems like their tools are better.
It is, yeah.
But there's more process and bureaucracy, whereas Google is like a little bit rougher and a little bit harder to navigate, but they also seem to not give as much of a fuck.
Yeah, they're more lenient on the platform side, though.
And the business analysis of this too is that most of the customer base is probably going to be iPhone. Mm-hmm. This is like a demographics thing, but I am 90% of the way through the Play Store. Okay. I'm approved to submit the app, and I just have to submit the build.
Yeah.
And then, get feedback or whatever. But it also just adds complexity because it's a totally different payment system, and I'm using a library that supposedly makes that easy, but I'm getting to the point now where I'm like going to just make a web app because I'm so sick and tired of having another company tell me what I can and cannot do in my fucking app. Like, it's my fucking app. If I want it to be a janky payment experience, then it should be fine, right? People won't use it. That's okay, but I should be able to do what the fuck I want. It's my fucking company.
No, but that reflects poorly on the platform.
Yeah, I'm not doing anything illegal, and I'm not being disingenuous. It's like you pay me money for the thing, you get the thing. Like, it's really straightforward. Whereas like the loot box bullshit and like fucking Instagram, it survives on the platform just fine.
That's another conversation. The gatekeeper platform.
No, it's bullshit. But yeah, so app in public, and then maybe some of the search stuff, or at least I can talk you through the architecture of it. I don't know if it'll have it built yet.
Okay. Yeah. No, that'll be fun. All right. Nice.
Yeah, how about you? Am I going to get a helmet demo in the mail?
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I'm looking at baby steps right now, seeing how the progress has gone so far, like putting the whole thing together and then having to break it apart and then putting it back together several times.
Yeah.
I'm having an issue with not being able to adjust my current. So I need to apply a certain amount of current, and I have the circuit, and it should be controllable by this microcontroller that I have. But no matter what I do, it's always a constant current, and not a current value that I want. So by next time, I hope to be able to have a demo of me being able to change the amount of current that I can output through this dumb circuit.
Now I'm like thinking about, is your controller bad?
Just throw
a bunch of resistors together, man.
Exact. So that's kind of what I need to do. Is I haven't gone down the exercise of let me start with a super simple circuit and then add things, because I started from I put everything together because this is the way it should work. And of course, it doesn't work that way.
Same, man. I did the same thing with the fucking app. I'm like, this is really easy, and then I hate design. I really appreciate design, but the amount of focus and attention that you have to put into design drives me insane.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, that's off by 3 pixels. And I'm like, nope, it's fine. It's fine if it's off by 3 pixels. Like, I'll fix it later. Like, I want to get a front end engineer as fast as possible. Because like the back end shit, like I would do that all day long.
Yeah.
But this front end, I just fucking hate everything about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's not trivial. That's why there's so many of these weird front end frameworks that are opinionated to do things a certain way. And
I appreciate the work that people do, you know, but it's not my thing. And it's just all the shit that should be so easy isn't. Yeah. And it's 2024. I'm like, it's 2024. Why does Apple not have a sandbox fucking environment that I can just switch the API to like sandbox.applestore.apple.com or something, right? And then, it works. Oh my God, flip it over. Now it's production. Great. That's all the rest of the fucking world works.
Yeah.
You know, like
only questions that Apple can answer. I'm sure they have some reason for not doing it, actually.
Blows my mind. No, fuck them. The reason they do it is they fuck them. Like there's no, I mean, I was doing software bullshit 15 years ago, staging production, right? It mimic, you know, and staging and production never are the same, but they should be close. And sometimes it's an API flip. Sometimes you have to, you know, code shit.
Yeah.
It's not a radical concept. All right. Anyway, I want my helmet in the mail.
You'll be one of the first to get one, I promise.
And I'll do it in the bathtub and see if that changes.
You know, you probably could. The way I'm building it, you could do this in the bathtub, to be honest. Even if you drop the thing in the water, nothing would happen.
Are you going to make that claim in public?
Yes, I can confidently make that claim. The device will probably die, and that's it.
It's so funny. When I interviewed Christine for the podcast, and she works at a cosmetic company, you know, that has all organic skin stuff. It's not cosmetics, it's skin stuff. And we were talking, and she's, you could eat it. I was like, really? She's, yeah, we use all food grade ingredients. And it had never occurred to me that even like organic skincare stuff probably shouldn't consume it, right? And like your skin is absorbent. And we had this really interesting kind of, like, I don't know if it's a tangent or something. I was like, really? And it never had crossed my mind, but I was like, that's a compelling advertisement. Like skincare you can eat. Don't, you know, and I was like, in the episode, I was like, do not eat the skincare shit. But like the fact that, you know, it is safe to consume. It's great if you have pets or kids, like that whole thing too. But it's also, you're putting it on your body. It should be, anyway. So I'm just thinking about that with your helmet. Don't play with it.
I think there's some, I'm sure there's got to be a pet company that has the same slogan, right? Pet food you can eat.
Oh no, yeah. It all has to be FDA certified anyway.
Yeah.
Fun fact, yeah. Like pet food is human consumable if it's bought in the United States.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Even ones that aren't intended for.
Yeah. Yeah, like you might get like an upset stomach, but it's not going to poison you or anything.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and that's like dog and cat food. If you have some sort of exotic fucking snake or something, I don't know. Don't eat the snake food. But like, yeah, and because kids will eat it, right? They'll get into the dog food bag or they'll pop a cat food, and
that makes sense.
And it's probably not the most nutritious, but yeah, it's tested to ensure that it like doesn't kill you or poison you or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, cool. Well, this was fun. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Okay.
You can find us at 38.com. It's like the word create, but with a 3 instead of the C. As always, we encourage you to listen, watch, do. We'll see you next time. You can support this podcast at patreon.com/38 or at ko-fi.com/38. Thanks for listening.